is Haley. I run all things digital growth product at Codesmith. So pretty much anything you see online, I spend time on, whether that be CSX or our online events or our website or things on social media or blogs or really anything. That's kind of been my place. I kind of sit right in between the growth team and the engineering team. So kind of working with both of those. I've been at Codesmith for almost 4 years now, though, so I'm happy to talk about anything from different programs that we have and kind of answering questions. I've taken some of our programs myself, so can answer those too, but I think save those more student experience questions for the students that will be joining us towards the end. So I'm just going to get rolling. A little bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. Talking about our curriculum, career services. I will talk about what we are doing right now around COVID-19, and so kind of what our current on-site programs look like and what our plan is going to be for the next couple months and what that looks like. So if you have questions about that specifically, I will go over it, but happy to answer questions on that too. We'll chat admissions, financial aid, scholarships, and then how to prepare, which goes into both our prep programs as well as our resources. We do have some info sessions next Monday night that are specifically on our part-time remote and full-time remote programs, as well as a separate info session that's on our prep programs, JavaScript for beginners and CS prep. But I will talk about those prep programs today in the sense of how they fit into the prep for admissions for this full-time on-site program. But if you are dying for more details there, you are welcome to join us next week as well, or I'm happy to chat over email about it more. I'm just knowing I won't go like super into the nitty gritties on those. I'll kind of go over the surface of them. Let's go. So what is Codesmith? Codesmith is a Center for Software Engineering Excellence. We like to talk about that just because it's not just a program. We offer tons of remote learning opportunities from free workshops to online platforms. We do lots of community building things in the usual world, such as like workshops at other locations or other companies. It's all about like getting software engineering learning options for folks, whether or not that's through our full-time or part-time programs, or for people that are just trying coding for free or want to be part of like the tech scene in both LA, New York, or online. We do, though, have a 12-week software engineering immersive program in Los Angeles and New York City. That is what I'll be focusing on today, as well as our 2 part-time programs I just mentioned. We're definitely known most, I think, for our full-time in-person program, but these other programs are a little bit newer, and we'll go into those as well. All right. And so why an immersive program like Codesmith? I think a lot of people take coding boot camps or programs like ours for a variety of different reasons. One, they're a lot shorter than your typical 4-year computer science degree. They do range in how long they are. Our programs that we're going to be talking about today are about 12 to 13 weeks, 13 weeks total, but there's a week off in the middle that I'll talk about a little bit that's optional. And then just return on investment. In general, they are a lot cheaper than 4-year computer science degrees or master's programs as well, as kind of like a quicker route there. Our program in general is coming in at a more advanced level than a lot of other programs. And so people do come to Codesmith with computer science degrees, as well as been working in the field of engineering for a couple of years. So that's kind of a little bit of a different variety than other programs, but there are some distinct differences. We have a recent grad of ours named Juan who went through a 4-year computer science degree and then Codesmith, write a post on it. So I can share that in the chat actually later if anyone is interested in that specifically. If you're coming from a CS background, I'm happy to share that because he kind of outlines his own experiences and some of the differences he saw there. It is also a lot easier for programs like ours to iterate on curriculum and add in newer technology. Just since we're a lot shorter, it's a lot less bureaucratic than a larger university, and we're able to kind of be more on the ground because we host a lot of workshops. We have partner companies that do hiring through us, and we're just really kind of, our main focus is to be teaching what's the most relevant at this time. So while we do spend time on computer science fundamentals and things like algorithms and data structures that are core to computer science, especially that you'd learn in college, we also are able to spend a lot more time on what actually those projects or technologies that are most commonly seen in the job search or in the job market are today, and able to focus a lot more on things like that, just because we're able to iterate a lot more quickly. In-depth learning community and tight-knit community. So this is a huge part about immersive programs. Everyone on-site has gone through, a ton of work to be able to be accepted here. They're all very committed. It is a lot more of an immersive environment than traditional education, since our students are on-site or doing their learning for usually about 100 hours a week, 6 days a week. And a lot more time is spent in class, working with others. There's a lot more structured calendar than for typical university schedules. So that's definitely a big difference. Just that kind of immersiveness. You are just living, breathing code, your cohort mates, your instructors. That is pretty much all you're able to do within that 3-month time frame. I'm happy to go into more details there, but intensity-wise, it is a lot more rigorous, as you might expect, because it's going through a lot more curriculum in a shorter amount of time. Project and portfolio development is also huge. I will go into detail as we go along, a lot more about what those projects are specifically, but there's a lot more emphasis on building tools that are able to be directly related to the job that you end up going into after the program. And so it's a lot more designed for your resume and to give you that actual experience that folks that are hiring are looking for, as opposed to, more lower level projects or smaller things that you might build in university as well. I took a lot of computer science classes in college, so familiar from that on a personal level as well. Most of mine were in Python though, and it was a little bit of a while ago. So things have changed since then, but just to kind of give that comparison. And then career support. While, all colleges offer career support and have great advising communities there as well, that is definitely a huge reason that a lot of people go into programs like ours, is because you have that dedicated hiring support. Spend a lot more time catering your resume, doing a lot more whiteboarding and mock interview prep. And we also work with you until you have that job versus letting you go into the world and kind of, whatever happens is more up to you. We are a lot more involved in every step of the process there. All of these things I will go through a lot more in the upcoming slides, but just think if you have that question, if I don't answer that, make sure to remember that for the end. Academic and support team. A difference I like to highlight here is that the academic and support team, their whole job is for students, whether that be, they're there until 8 p.m. After that, we have a lot of our start lectures at like 9 p.m. that are just generous people. And so that's kind of their whole role. A lot of our instruction team also works on engineers for our website. Our current tools are working, but the primary role of them is to be that lead instructor role. So where in typical education, you might not have access to those instructors after class time ends, that is certainly not the case in these programs. Their offices or currently their Zoom room is always approachable, and you can kind of always use them as a resource throughout the day and the evening. We also have folks that are working on Saturdays. And so really a key part is that support that we have from the instruction team to the students. That's something we pay a lot of attention to. That is really our priority here. Student experience is huge at Codesmith, and that starts with the instruction team. So being very involved in how everyone is doing all the time, both academically as well as emotionally, since it is a very rigorous program. Instructors team is involved on both sides of that. So whether they are the ones leading your lectures day to day or kind of able to help you out with projects or, narrow down your scope or work with that overall, they're also there as a resource for just your general well-being during the program and take that really into account as well. This is the team that are kind of the lead instruction team. We have a plethora of engineering fellows that are kind of, you can compare them to kind of a TA type role. They lead some of our smaller scale workshops and lectures, as well as are more available for something called Help Desk, which we use really frequently in the program, both on site as well as remote currently, where they're able to help you if you're hitting a block during that day's challenge or project. You kind of have a mentor that's always assigned to you that is able to work through that. Alumni network is also huge. Our alumni network is quite strong. We have a really active Slack channel, a really active group of people that are able to be a resource to you as well. But they're not on site usually day to day, but this team is. I'm sure if you've been at workshops, you've met a few of these individuals. Will's our CEO, he's teaching a Node workshop right now. If other folks have met him or seen his YouTube videos around CSX. And then Phil is our New York lead instructor along with Kyle. And then Dave is our LA lead. And she becomes more involved towards the end of the program when you are looking at your career services and kind of more of that graduate outcome support. All very friendly and amazing people. Oh, going back. Okay, community. These pictures obviously are not relevant at the moment. All we can talk about a little bit here is just the normal what we look like for LA and New York community. I will mention later kind of how we've transitioned a lot of these things that we know out of our program. So family dinner just happened. We do that every Monday night, whether that's in person or remotely, where everyone eats together in the junior and senior cohorts in each location, and we do something called shout outs. That is a huge thing for both our team and students. It's basically a time for you to be able to thank other students in your cohort, or maybe your mentor who's a senior or a junior team member you have been working with, and basically say like, thanks for helping me out within the past week. That can be something very specific, like you helped me overcome a block on the databases unit in this very specific way, or you were able to give me a ride home because my car broke down. It really just like is all part of our just general emphasis on giving back to others and saying thank you and kind of shouting other people out so you don't have to be the one shouting out your own accomplishments. This is a really fun time also just to kind of get together, have more like, just kind of community feel, because 100 hours a week for 3 months straight can get a little bit overwhelming. Everyone needs to take breaks. Reminder that you have those other folks that are there rooting for you and pushing you forward, and they're all, able to be that resource for you. You are not in it alone, which happens quite frequently for just people getting overwhelmed. Team building activities, we do things like relay races and scavenger hunts, just to keep things lighthearted. If you have been, working nonstop for a couple of weeks, it's really nice to have these things to kind of help you bond with your cohort mates, get to know everyone on a more personal level, and just kind of able to take a break from just coding 24/7. Game nights are very fun. This picture right here is of kickball that we played in LA not that long ago. My personal favorite. I love kickball. So definitely looking forward to getting that started the next couple of months. And stress relieving activities. So things like setting time outside of your day to either talk to team members one-on-one or have time that we put aside called circles, where we basically are not allowing coding to be mentioned in 30 minutes. And so we talk about things like, like what were myths that you thought as a child were 100% true, or kind of like questions just to kind of keep things light, get things, moving, and kind of give you a break from whatever you're working on during that time. Inclusivity and diversity is also huge at Codesmith. So a really big part about why we are the way that we are is because so many of our students are coming from different backgrounds. That can be both professionally, economically, around the world. Really just all sorts of folks are going into software engineering through Codesmith. And so it's important for us to have that be kind of an even playing field here, and everyone feel comfortable with their own background and with their own opinions, and where they're coming from, it's all being respected. So we do a lot of things around women's experiences, since definitely a minority in tech to begin with. So things like women in software engineering events. Algorithm is something that we do for our New York program that brings back prospective students, current female students, and then graduates to work on either challenges or whiteboarding practice together. Do things like ladies' lunches, special alumni events, women-only coding happy hours and workshops. I would definitely take a look at if you're interested. We have those every couple of weeks that are taught by our female identifying instructors. Those are a really fun time, as well as different scholarships and initiatives that we do with partners. We partner pretty closely with Women Who Code, an organization, and offering scholarships through there, as well as our own personal scholarships. Implicit bias workshops happen every cohort as well. And so kind of taking that into account, we are looking to create leaders in the tech industry, which means that all of our software engineers that are graduating out of our program, we are basically training up to be leaders in the field, which means that they'll be hiring at some point and leading teams that are also hiring. And so talking about implicit bias is really important there, especially from a job search perspective, how to view resumes, how to know your own biases that are intrinsic, and how to understand these in order to combat them, especially hiring down the line. And office hours happen during the program in both their junior and senior portion, which is basically a time that every student has set aside to sit down one-on-one with a team member, talk about how things are going, talk about what's been going well for them, what's been challenging for them. And so knowing that you have that kind of one-on-one time with a team member just to make sure that things are going well and you're able to voice anything that may be happening with you, either positive or negative or really whatever there. Next slide. Some logistics for everyone. These are always fun, just because that's good to know. Our on-site program in LA and New York, our LA office is in Venice Beach, our New York office is in Soho. The typical hours are 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. and Saturday from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Quite typically, folks are there in the office or working after those hours. Those are not the required structured hours though. So you have a pretty packed schedule your whole time during those hours, but then afterward, if you're working on challenges still, or we have a hackathon that goes on during your second week of Codesmith, things like that. So these are just the more structured hours. Like I mentioned, it's a total of 13 weeks, but that 7th week, basically in the middle, is an optional on-site week, and that is when your team is doing ideation. The first half of the program we call the junior portion, and the second half of the program we call the senior portion, and that middle week is basically spent ideating with your production project team on what that project is you're going to start the first week of your senior portion. So that's an optional on-site. And let's go further into the junior portion. So the junior portion I like to talk about is really a lot more curriculum heavy. Every 2 days for the first month is broken up into a module where you're focusing on one concept specifically. That could be something like Redux, React, databases, Express, Node. I guess we have these nice little logos down here, so they are showing those. I don't have to read them out. But basically, you are spent during that time. You have usually anywhere from 3 to 4 lectures on that subject, but the majority of your time is spent pair programming through a challenge or skill builder with a partner. And so that's really kind of going back to what Codesmith is all about. It's about like working through those blocks, understanding like how that concept works theoretically and why that is being implemented, why the industry is using that, why the standard is that, but then to really understand something and to be able to like work on yourself as an autonomous engineer is you have to go build with that technology. You have to try to be connecting, your front end to your back end and having that not work. And that's how you start remembering things. And that's how things start clicking and you start growing that skill set. It's not us walking you through everything tutorial. You will not remember that, I promise. And so that's a big difference of the way that learning is. It's a lot more, here's how this concept works and how you can understand it on a high level and why this is used. Go work with it, go break something, go build something, go spend the next 2 days nonstop thinking about that concept. And then that is how those skills are used. This is also, it's a pretty intense part of the time for sure, since you're picking up a lot of information very quickly. So that is important to notice, that then the majority of the program is also spent doing projects that is then reinforcing all the curriculum that you learned in the beginning half, in the beginning 4 weeks really. So while you are spending those 2 days on React, that is not the only time you are spending on React throughout the program. Likely you will build either a solo project, a Scratch project, or your production project, or your reinforcement project. I'll talk about all these projects in a second. We'll be using React as well. And so that's when you'll continue to go deeper and to reinforce that again. This is kind of just your first shot at it and your first time getting to know it. And then when you actually go work with it a lot more is in that project phase. So engineering best practices are also talked about here. This is where core computer science comes in. So things like algorithms, system design, design patterns, programming paradigms, things like that come into play. And then our curriculum is constantly being updated. So recently added in units on UX, UI, DevOps. What's the other one we just added? We updated our testing unit just based on things that we are hearing back from our industry advisors. So things like here are a lot more back and forth. We used to teach Angular. I'm not sure if anyone here uses Angular or knows about Angular, but we've gone to React and Redux pretty specifically, but do still have people that choose to do a lot different either frameworks or spend time on different technologies in their production project. So we have a lot of folks that graduate Codesmith and go into jobs that they've never used that technology before, but they've become so experienced picking up new technologies in such a short amount of time, they're able to make that jump. You also spend some time in your junior portion building projects. I will talk about that in a second because we have a slide specifically on projects, but also wanted to talk about hack hours. So every day for your entirety of the program starts off with a hack hour. That is basically, as you might think, an hour spent on an algorithm challenge. These are structured throughout the program a little bit differently. On the Sunday or Saturday before or Saturday usually, you have a lecture on the upcoming, like a lot of these types of hack hours can be put into certain like specific ways of solving them. Those so you just learn over time. So basically we present like a specific strategy for solving hack hours. And then the following 5 days of hack hours would be spent you would solve them using that strategy that was shown. And that goes throughout the whole program. Hack hours are super helpful for the job hunt after the program, since a lot of the technical interviewing we've seen have been really algorithm focused, really spent on, here's this challenge, how would you go about solving that? And those strategies come into play, really helpful there. So you spend that first hour doing a hack hour, and then you spend the 15 minutes afterwards or 15 to 30, honestly, typically, getting a lecture on the previous day's hack hour and basically how that works. So kind of an approach to that. There's lots of different ways to solve these usually. So either optimal approach or one that's most commonly used. All right, senior portion. So the second half of the program is a lot more project focused, like I mentioned. So advanced lectures come into play, but they're usually smaller modules or smaller days. So DevOps, advanced Git, UX, UI, some of these ones I talked about, system design, machine learning, but the majority of your time is spent building projects. That first month of your senior program is only spent on one project called the production project. And that is, I'll go into a little bit of detail after this too, but that is definitely the main project at Codesmith. That is going to be a huge part of your resume. That's going to be a huge experience for you, getting that experience that makes you qualified for the positions after Codesmith, because you are going super, super in depth on a very high level technology and either building developer tools, libraries, different ways of working with the technologies that developers use day to day and really making you that expert in that area and able to go really deep on that. The hack hours also become a lot more interview focused, so a lot more whiteboarding prep, a lot more just interview prep in general, mostly just common hack hours that are, or algorithms that are seen, things that you should really know how to do. And then tech talks come into play as well. So in your senior portion, you will spend one of your evenings doing a tech talk that can be on a variety of topics. It would be something that's not taught in the program though, and you will give a presentation to the rest of your cohort mates, usually about 15 minutes on that topic. This is a way for you to express your interest. If there's something you're specifically interested in, want to focus on, you're able to present that, as well as you're exposed to different tech talks or different technologies, different things people are interested for the entirety of the program, since during your junior portion, you're watching the seniors tech talks, and during the senior portion, you're doing your own tech talk as well as watching other seniors. So just a really cool way to see a lot more about what's going on in the tech industry and be able to present on that to your cohort mates. The hiring program also comes into play in the second half of the program. So starting things like mock whiteboarding, mock interviews, building out your resume, working on your online profiles. That starts about week 8, and then week 11 and 12 are a lot more emphasizing on the career services aspect, but that goes throughout the entirety, just so you're going through different drafts of your resume. We do about 4 drafts of a resume, and then different building upon whiteboarding practice based on what algorithm strategies you've learned so far. I will keep going. Projects, I mentioned a few of these, but let's focus a little bit more on them. So the solo project is your first project. It is exactly what it sounds like. It is a project by yourself. So that is right after the first 4 weeks of curriculum. This is when we're really emphasizing folks, you know, this isn't your startup idea that you're going to build in these 2 days. And this is really about like you working a little bit closer with one of those technologies that you first spent the first 4 weeks learning. So say you're feeling a little bit iffy on React and Redux, or, you know, you want to spend a little bit more time on the back end. This is your time to do so. So kind of working with different aspects, kind of delving a little bit deeper. Usually people bring a couple APIs into this. It depends on what the person's project is they're doing. Then the Scratch iteration project, that's also during the junior portion. This is when you have your first team project. So basically you work with your Scratch team for about 3 to 4 days on that project. A little bit more advanced, you're working on Team GitHub, you're working on kind of how that whole process works using Scrum and Agile a little bit more there. And then every team comes together, and then your team picks up another team's Scratch project. So you're working on an unfamiliar code base. It kind of gives you a chance to kind of get familiar with that, since that's going to be the majority of your career, as you're not building something for the first time. You're most likely iterating on it, fixing bugs, or adding to it. So kind of an experience on that. It also, I think, really dives into why you should use comments and explain your functions, because you get to experience when people do not, and how difficult it is to kind of jump in and try to go from there. The production project and reinforcement project are in the second half of the program, so the senior portion. That production project is really the peak of Codesmith. It's really, I think, one of the coolest parts about it, and really differentiates it from a lot of other programs. You are building a very, very advanced project that is either working with engineers in the field to know what they'd really benefit from, or like building something out that is like kind of a developer tool, in the sense that it is, you know, maybe looking at how React hierarchy is displayed and how you can better show that, or showing the performance of different types of databases using very specific testing functionalities. So these are a lot more advanced projects. It's not going to be like you connecting, you know, the Google Apps API with the Yelp API and showing things like that. These are not the type of projects you're working on. These are very intensive, deep dive, advanced projects that you're able to basically give back to the developer community there and talk about a lot in your interviews. One of my favorite stories is we had a grad a long time ago named Gordon. He built a project called Webpack Monitor that was working with Webpack and basically able to visualize a lot of different, like how long things were taking and how difficult it was being. And the team that he ended up working on was using Webpack Monitor to monitor their current Webpack situation. And so he came in being like the creator of that and was able to interview with a team that was already using it, which is a really cool example and just kind of the showing of what types of projects these are. They're not like for fun type things. They really are to help out the developer community and contribute to open source. Reinforcement project is for folks to kind of come back to the main technologies that we taught in the first 4 weeks of the program. Since you're diving so deep in the production project, we want to kind of bring you back out, have you work on something else that you haven't been focusing on 4 weeks kind of before you go into the job search. So if your production project was really front-end focused, we recommend working on the back end for your reinforcement projects. So we're kind of able to dive into that and kind of speak to that a little bit more on the job search since it hasn't been so long since you viewed those things. All right, career services. I've mentioned a couple of these in kind of overview ways, but practice and mock interviews. These are super important. Interviewing is such a skill set for any position you're going into, not just software engineering, but it takes a lot of time to figure out how to word things, how to best display things. You know, if you are stumbling over your words and talking about something, it just takes practice. And so wanting to start that as soon as possible. Online profiles and resumes. A lot of individuals from Codesmith are coming from an engineering background or a technical background. A lot are not. So this might be your first time doing a more technically focused resume. It might be your first time talking about that or knowing what's, you know, the right type of resume in the tech industry. I think a lot of different industries have different standards for that. And so knowing what's either more appropriate or the way to represent this new skill set you've been working on is really important for going into that job search as well. And understanding how to use the common job sites for a more technical standpoint as well. So there's a lot of different just job platforms that maybe have been less applicable in your prior career and are more applicable in a software engineering career in terms of where to find open positions and how to communicate with companies. And so we'll go over all of those, basically just helping with networking as well as like what events you should be going to. Interview days are only for our on-site programs. So these are lightning round interviews that happen with our partner companies to help basically give you that chance to interview with companies before you graduate. A few of the ones that came to our last hiring or interviewing days, Disney, Chow Now, Discovery, companies like that. These are pretty quick interviews. They're 10-minute phone screens. So we are going to continue having them during this remote time since it wasn't on-site interviews as well. So just a note about that. And then post-grad support. So while we do a ton of career service work while you're in the program, this definitely does not stop there. You are going to be coming to on-site check-ins every 2 weeks after you graduate, working with our alumni team. We have an alumni support fellow in both LA and New York who is available to do mock interviews, to help you with whiteboarding, to give you career advice, head at your what are those called? I'm so blinking. Cover letters, things like that after the program. So it certainly is not like a once you graduate, like see you later. We are involved in every step of the way until you get that first job. And then we have tons of people coming back for their second job, third job, using the alumni community for interview tips if they've interviewed at that company, as well as to kind of help out people if they have an open position to their company or their team. Also, Eric is one of our senior advisors at the company. He's really involved on the negotiation aspect. So being able to kind of understand your offer that you've gotten, like if you, are getting compensated in certain different ways, kind of like understanding what that looks like and what's the best way for you to go forward with that. And so he works with each of our grads individually over the phone or text, or basically how to understand your offer and like what are you leaving on the table and kind of how to go forward with that. So that's a really, really awesome part of the hiring process. Okay, how are we being impacted at the moment? So all of our programs are currently remote and are going to be remote until advised otherwise. This is what every educational institute is doing in the United States, I'm sure, but definitely in LA and New York. And if not, they will be soon. So transition to entirely remote. To be honest, we are doing remote programs anyway, so we have quite a bit of experience remote, which I think makes us feel really lucky in this situation, is that this isn't a huge transition for us. While, we do miss the on-site experience, and that is a lot of what folks are signing up for, we hope to be on-site as soon as we can. This is obviously a world situation we are dealing with right now, so kind of how we are dealing with that is there's an extended option to defer. If you end up starting the program and you're like, I just can't do this like this, you're able to defer. Deferments are valid up to 3 months, and then you do a technical reassessment at that time if you end up going further than that, just so we can make sure that you're ready to start the program still and have been coding during those last 3 months we haven't seen you. We are also doing something really specific, which is a $1,000 remote stipend, which is given to every student who starts the program remotely. This is because you are not signing up for a remote program and most likely do not have the at-home office setup or basically technology that we recommend for optimal remote learning. So we recommend things like buying an iPad and buying an iPencil. Whiteboarding is huge at Codesmith. If you've been to our offices before this, all of our walls are covered in whiteboards. Every desk is whiteboarding. And so something that we found is really important for continuing to be as good as an online experience as possible is being able to whiteboard. We use an app called Notability. If you already have an iPad, I'd recommend getting familiar with it. It's an awesome app. And then the iPencil makes it so much easier. As well as like an at-home desk setup if you don't have a standing desk that you think would be really optimal for making sure if you're able, to sit at your desk for 10 hours to 14 hours every day, definitely takes a toll. So we are aware of that this program isn't meant to be remote. People that are signing up for it aren't really prepared for that usually. And so that's kind of something that we're doing to offset that. So we use either reimbursements or purchase those specifically. And then that is for your at-home office setup. And those are to reemphasize for all programs that are starting remote. No matter if you complete your program remotely or you are brought back on site at a certain time during that program. Cultural adjustments. So I spent a while talking about cultural things that we do that are mostly for when we are on site. So collaboration and coding is something that we've added in now, which is basically trying to mimic that way that when we work on site, you're able to like tap another group on the shoulder and ask them a question or being like, how did that go for you? So collaboration coding is where two groups of pair programmers meet together for an hour every module and talk about their approach to solving the problem. This can definitely happen naturally via Slack. We use Zoom. There's tons of different ways to collaborate with your cohort mates, but this basically allows it for that kind of like more structured environment of working with other team members that you aren't assigned with working right now. Mentor-mentee weekly sessions. So when you're a junior, you have a mentor that's a senior that can kind of be your guide and be a resource to you during the program. And then when you're a senior, you have a junior mentor. So making that happen every week, that usually happens a lot more naturally where people pass each other in the hallways or go grab a coffee or things like that. So making sure that those still happen. We've taken our Thursday nights, which are typically networking and drinks and games and things like on site. So we did like a spa movie night last Thursday. There's lots of games online if you were not here at the beginning, but like Pictionary, super fun, things like that. So transitioning those experiences to the remote environments as well. And then closing remarks. So we do things at lunch as well as start of the day, basically like getting everyone back together and making sure that you're still having that bonding time with your cohort mates. Since this is a huge base that you're going to be using throughout your career, these are the connections that you're making. You want to make sure that that's still a strong relationship. So closing remarks are things like, how'd the day go, everybody? We do stretches. We kind of like sign off together and say like, it's kind of just a way to transition from your day to your at-home life. I don't know if that's been difficult for other people that are working from home, but I myself have noticed like it's hard for me to transition from like work mode into like at-home, not work mode. Maybe that's a personal problem, but something that we're trying to mimic in like this example here of just like kind of getting back together and saying like good night, or like if you're still working, that's awesome, but like official hours have ended basically. Outcomes overview. So outcomes is a huge part of Codesmith. So kind of what job are you looking to go into? We have grads that go into startups, Fortune 500 companies, huge tech companies, nonprofits, all across the board. Our outcomes are audited by CIRR, which is kind of the industry standard for reporting these. You can go check out their website if you're interested in how they do their reporting system, but it's basically a standardized reporting system that we have to get checked off. So we have worked with an independent CPA firm that audits all of our outcomes, and then that goes to CIR, which represents it in a very specific way with all the programs they work with. So our median starting salary for the first half of 2019, since it reports for job seekers for the following 6 months, and that's kind of how we go in 6-month chunks. So in LA is 114K, and in New York is 125K, so median's 120K. Yeah, so just some awesome stories about people. We have a lot of different people going into different roles. So either UX, engineers, someone just got that job recently in the last couple of weeks. But then, yeah, a lot of different opinions in terms of if people are going for bigger companies or smaller companies. It's a huge variety, I would say. So, it's not like this isn't like a program meant for just like huge tech companies. There's a lot of people that go across the board or, really are just interested in the nonprofit industry, or like we've had people that are just looking to upskill and actually not even going into software engineering at all and just want to kind of add coding to their repertoire. So lots of variety there. So admissions, talking a little bit about that. What we look for in candidates is not just JavaScript knowledge. That's what I always want to pay close attention to. A lot of people coming in like, I've worked as a JavaScript engineer for 2 years. Like I should be able to ace a technical interview right away. I've seen that be not the case many, many times, just because we're looking for other things as well. One, your problem solving approach. So how can we understand like how you're breaking this down? The whole point of Codesmith is that you understand what you're working with, so you're able to pick up new technologies as they come. Software engineering as an industry is constantly changing. The most popular framework, the most popular language, like that's going to be ever evolving. And so it's not important for you to like be able to memorize something and then be able to spit that back on a challenge. We are so much more interested in like how you know how that's working and why you're solving it in a certain way. And that starts from our admission process, because that tells us that you actually really understand how JavaScript is working. And that's going to carry you through the program. So that also comes into play with technical communication. Can you tell us line by line, like why you're solving it that way and how it's working? Engineering approach, this is huge. When you hit a block, are you screaming at the computer? Are you like hitting your partner? Like obviously not great. We are looking for like calm, patient people that are doing meticulous debugging. Are you console logging? Are you looking at docs? Are you understanding where to look? Are you on Stack Overflow? Things like this. There's definitely best practices for these. Are you starting to know those? Non-technical communication, like this is a hard program. This will push you for sure. Like, are you going to be nice throughout that process? Are you going to remain positive? Are you going to be a team player? Like, we are looking for people that are interested in working with others. This is, software engineering, I think a lot of times is viewed as like a very solo career. That is certainly not the case. Like, you are always on teams. Like, wow, like there's that like very specific image I have of like a man in the dark in his basement on like his 14th hour of coding alone. That is not the case in the real world, and wanting to set up best like our graduates for success there. Like working on teams is huge, and being a nice person and able to do that is also crucial. And then JavaScript knowledge, obviously, this is a more advanced program in terms of where you're coming in from. So we do have a level of expectation. So callbacks, closures, and higher order functions is usually the topics that we are testing on that technical interview. And so I would kind of characterize that as intermediate JavaScript, but that's kind of what we're looking at you coming in from. And that's what the technical interview is going to test. Admissions process. So an online application. Non-technical interview is really just about your background, why you're interested in software engineering, why you're passionate about tech, why you're interested in Codesmith, and just getting to know you a lot more on a personal level. Why are you looking to do this program? Technical interview is about an hour where you work with one of our software engineering fellows. There's an endless list of problems, and it's not about you getting to a certain problem. It's a lot about those 5 things that I just talked about. So are you explaining your code? Are you able to debug something when you've hit an error? Like, are you walking us through what you're doing? Are you understanding what you're doing while you're walking us through it? Things like that. You are able to do a technical interview up to 3 times. And so if you do not pass on that first time, do not fear. We will usually give you a call and like let you know what was a blocker for you. Do we think you need to work on your understanding of closures a little bit more? Do we think your technical communication should use some improvement? We'll tell you that specifically so you'll know what to work on for your next time you're interviewing. And then decision and financing, obviously we are there every step of the way. So if you are accepted into Codesmith, we'll work with every student individually on their personal situation. So whether that is a combination of financing or scholarships, things like that. So we just knowing that is discussed a lot more on a personal level too. Financial aid, cost of the program, we have a large scholarship fund as well, payment plans we do for part-time remote, as well as some specific scenarios for in-person students, but that again is kind of decided by that kind of last step within the admissions team. And then financing partners such as Climb and Skills Fund, you are able to see what your amount would be on both of their websites, and so able to go and look at like what your interest rate would be and how long it would be if you were paying those back. You're able to also borrow for living expenses through Skills Fund. And so if you want to pay for rent during the program or, food, things like that, you're able to do that through them as well. How to prepare, can talk about these. So has anyone been on CSX before? Thumbs up. Couple thumbs up. So CSX is basically our online platform that's completely free, that has a plethora of videos and challenges to work through. That is going to be the best resource besides our workshops to prepare for the immersive, since a lot of those concepts that we have challenges on are what we test for in the technical interview. So if you aren't on CSX currently, I'd recommend going and making an account after this info session. There also is a really active Slack channel that's one of my favorite parts about CSX. So we have a specific channel called CSX Challenge Help, where if you hit a block on your challenge, you're able to screenshot that and post it on that channel. And then there's a lot of feedback about people that are able to help you solve that or overcome that block. So it's also a really cool community feel, since it's not you just solving challenges. It's like you are able to either give feedback on other people for challenges that you've solved, or go and help and get that community support when you need it. And so I think one of the most frustrating parts of learning online is you feel very solitary. And if you hit a block, you're kind of okay, I guess I'm working for the next 3 days on this. And of course it ends up being a syntax error or something. So kind of able to kind of get over those and make it more of a fun experience. And then free JavaScript workshops. This is huge. So we have tons of workshops going on all the time, whether that be very beginner, things like variables, or more advanced. We have a workshop going on right now on Node. And so I definitely recommend those. JavaScript, the hard part specifically, is going to be the best preparation for your technical interview. One, because it shows kind of the communication level that we are looking for, because it's the way that we explain things, as well as it's also on those concepts that we are testing on the technical interview. Also just very fun. All of our instructors are super fun. It's not your classic coding class of dry stereotype thing. It's a lot more fun there. Things are pretty interactive. You will get called upon. Just a warning for everyone. Make sure you're paying attention, keep things going. I will quickly go over some of our prep programs that we offer. JavaScript for Beginners is an online prep program. It is specifically made for folks that have no experience coding. So if you are looking to get started, this is definitely the place for you. It is on 2 Saturdays, just during the day on those. These are already remote, so it's going to continue being remote since it already was. And then tuition, just to be clear, for both of our prep programs, JavaScript for Beginners and CS Prep, your JavaScript for Beginners tuition can roll over to your CS Prep tuition, and your CS Prep tuition can roll over to your Codesmith tuition. So if you take any of our prep programs, that is subtracted from your final tuition cost for the program. So that can be kind of confusing to folks, but just knowing that it all counts towards the same thing. Scholarships are also available for these. We do tons of scholarships. So I would say there's a lot of possibility that you're able to get up to 100% covered. So just to know, definitely apply for scholarships, even if you wouldn't think about that normally. CS Prep is more specifically for interview prep. So we go over a lot of those concepts that we are testing in our technical interviews, just to reiterate: callbacks, closures, hierarchy functions, things like that. This is a little bit more of an intensive class, so it's on weeknights as well. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Saturdays for 2 weeks. We also go into projects here. So you do a project as your final part of your CS Prep class, but it's a great way to get more pair programming experience. It's a great way to build your first project and kind of get more experience working with others. I definitely recommend doing pair programming before the technical interview, just because working with others and explaining why you're doing something is going to be the best help for basically able to be communicating in a technical interview, as well as preparing you for the on-site program. The technical interview isn't just a fun thing for us to see if you're able to be communicative. It's also that's how it's going to be your best setup for the program itself. Important dates to note. So some upcoming cohort dates: JavaScript for Beginners, May 2nd. We just had a cohort start application deadline, April 17th. Our upcoming CS Prep starting April 13th is actually full. CS Prep fills up quite quickly. We are now starting them every 2 weeks versus every month, because they are always full. But if you're looking for that April 27th start date, I recommend applying as soon as possible, just to confirm your spot, because there is already a wait list on our April 13th class, and they all get pushed to the next one. So just kind of an insider tip, you could say. So just apply to that definitely as soon as possible if you're looking for that cohort. And then upcoming Full-Time Onsite Immersives, LA starting May 4th and New York are starting May 26th. These will both be starting remote unless otherwise advised. We'll be sending out updates, obviously, as this goes along, but just a note to everyone that we are fully ready to start those remotely, since that is kind of what the world is looking like at this time. But none of us know what that is going to look like in mid-May, especially that New York May 26th one is a little bit up to be determined, but just want to say that at this time we are planning on those to start remote until advised otherwise. Questions? So I'm happy to answer questions if you have questions for me specifically, or else I can bring in our 2 students to answer questions as well. They'll start off by giving a little bit of background about themselves, just so you can ask them questions more catered to where their background is or what part of the program they're in. But if you have more logistical questions, I'm happy to help. I see a chat. Is Ideation Week 7 optional for full-time on-site program as well? It is optionally on-site. So ideating during that time is not optional. Your team will be ideating and you'll want to be involved in that, but it is optional for being on-site. So if you want to stay at home all that week or work online with your team remotely, or you're going on a trip during that time, that'd be the time to schedule it and then working with the team on and off. There's no structured hours for those times. So, your team might choose to meet from 3 to 4 every day or not at all as a group. And it just kind of depends on the team. Are both interviews via video as well? Currently, yes, they are all going to be videos. Typically, they are either video or in person, depending on what your preference is or where you're coming from. But at this time, all videos are being conducted remotely as well. Great question there. Any other questions for me, folks? In terms of hiring support, how do you make it available for instance to network with alumni? Does the fact that program is temporary remote change anything about it? I don't think so, since alumni are not on site too much to begin with. They do come back for hiring like our graduation support things, but we are doing all those remotely anyway. The alumni Slack is huge. We also do a lot of like organizing of alumni events. So, things like happy hours at places or just like time to get together, either coming back on site for like a larger event we have at Codesmith or like organizing a happy hour at a different location. I don't think in fact that it's remote template changes it. I think that they're all remote as well, so they wouldn't be coming on site anyway during this time. I think the alumni Slack is the biggest one. We also do mock interview day for both cohorts where alumni come back and conduct those mock interviews. That's usually done half remotely anyway. And so that's just going to be done full remotely, where you usually meet with like 4 to 5 alumni on the Saturday before you graduate to do like 10 to 15 minute phone screens mocks. And so those are a lot of the connections people make as well. I think all networking is probably down a little bit at this time, but hoping to get that up soon, and we'll just do even more events when we're able to have people either back on site or in other locations. But the alumni Slack, I would say, is the big one. There's a Discord as well. I'm not in that, but people do like that a lot, so I can't speak to it personally, but I know that people have said that that's a good place to chat as well. And LinkedIn, when you see people, a lot of people are adding connections or reaching out over email, especially if someone asks, like, do we have any alumni connections here? We'd share that information if people say that that's appropriate for them specifically. And feel free also to ask them out loud. If you don't want to type it, you can just unmute yourself, and I'm happy to answer that out loud.
What's a typical background for people that apply? I mean, like experience-wise.
Yeah, typical background is hard to say. Typical. We have quite a few folks that come in from like finance. So I think like accounting, that's a big one, or like finance in general. Or science, I would say, is a big pull as well for some reason. But we've had everything across the board, from either like been in engineering and doing as a like junior level developer for a couple of years to, bartender or part-time teacher or substitute teacher or artist or music teacher or really anything. I would say it's hard to say a typical background. Lots of folks come in with no experience and kind of go all the way up from JavaScript for beginners, CS prep, and then applying for the full-time program. And some folks just kind of come in either straight to CS prep or to the full-time program or just straight to the full-time program. Just also want to be clear, the prep programs are not required by any means. If you are like, this doesn't line up with what I'm envisioning my structure looks like, or I can't do weekends or I can't do evenings, totally fine. Those are just options for people that want to take advantage of those.
Great, thanks.
Yes, thanks, Ty. Other questions before I call on our students? I'll also send an email follow-up after this, basically with my contact information. And so if you think of it in an hour, totally fine, email me that. I'm happy to either hop on the phone or answer that over email as well. If no further questions, I'm going to let them know to jump in. Okay, I will let them know to join us. All right, they should be joining us in 1 second. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shuri.
Hi, Shuri. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I think, oh, Vaughn's here as well. Cool, cool. So I was just saying that you guys would give a brief intro to yourself, like what you were doing before Codesmith and then what part of the program you're in. So people's questions can be more specific for whoever they think might be the best to answer that, or both you guys can weigh in too. We are doing questions either in the chat or out loud, just to kind of give you a heads up. But Shri, do you want to take it away and kind of give a brief intro to what you were up to before Codesmith?
Yeah, I'd love to. Hey, everyone. I'm Shuri. I went to school for economics, and then I pretty much did sales, support, marketing. Realized I wanted to learn more. I was in the startup space, and now I'm trying to code because I want to stay in the startup space and do as much as I can.
Oh, and then would you mind just saying what part of the program you're in now so people can ask you questions?
Oh, yeah. So I'm a junior. I'm starting my week 4 there. And I had no coding experience before this either.
You just give me some hopes right there.
Oh yeah, before I didn't know anything about coding until I decided to try for a boot camp or like a Codesmith.
And Vaughn, do you want to give an intro too, just so everyone kind of has the same examples of what you're doing before and then where you currently are now?
Sure thing. Hey guys, my name is Vaughn. Before this, I had a degree in mechanical engineering from LMU, which is right over there from where I'm standing. Between then and now, I've pretty much been on the job market, looking around, trying to find jobs in the industry, while also doing some tutoring on the side, a little bit of volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club. Coming into this, I had some programming experience, a little bit of Python in the past, a little bit of C#, just messing around in like Unity and things like that. And right now, I am also a junior with Shuri, also in week 4.
Thank you both. And then if folks have questions, like I said, feel free to unmute yourself or ask in the chat, whatever you prefer to do.
Hi, I want to ask Sheree, since you said you had like no coding experience before, did you do like the CS prep first or the the JavaScript for beginners or anything like that prior
Yeah,
to
I did.
Supply?
Yeah, I did take CS prep.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Do you want to talk a little bit more about your CS prep experience, Tree? Maybe how that helped you prepare for the technical interview or kind of what the structure of the class was?
Yeah. So I had no experience. I just started self-studying back in the start of November. So I would say there are people who take the prep class with absolutely no experience. I would say get comfortable with seeing code. Like it is like a language. So like get used to like seeing the code, how it moves before the prep class, because that'll just like then in the prep class you can focus more on like how everything is moving versus just trying to remember like, oh, when I see this word, this is what it does. And there's a ton of like great resources that I know a lot of people take Udemy courses. I personally did Team Treehouse. I did Free Code Camp. I also did Code Wars. So you kind of alternate. I would say whatever gets you to stick to coding, go that way, because if someone recommends something and you don't like it, then find something that makes you excited to do it, because you don't want it to be painful. It should be fun.
I cannot believe that okay, there we go. I was like, there's no way I answered all the questions.
So my question is, since you guys assume that you guys are going to be on site for the program, and then this whole change to remote happened, do you feel like do you feel like the same sense of community with like your cohort, or like how is that since like 4 weeks into the program for both of you?
Guess I can answer. Yeah, so we were together for I think 4 days before we heard the news that we were going to be going remote. And honestly, in that 4 days, we had already kind of formed a pretty strong community. That was probably what surprised me the most, was just how quickly we all got comfortable with each other, and we're just like sort of a community already. It's definitely been a transition, but from what I've seen, we're still working together. We're still, in like an official sense, we're still programming together every day. There's always interaction. We're always in class together. It's not the same, but we do still have that support system where, if someone needs help, we're just, a couple clicks away. It's so easy to, get into a room with someone, just work through a problem. And yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a solo experience. Like, it's, even though we're remote, you're not like sitting in front of a computer by yourself for 12 hours, because there is structure. There is something to work on at pretty much every single hour. And for many of those hours, you are paired with someone or with a group. And the fact, like it goes from 9 to 8 p.m. So when you spend that many hours with someone, whether you're next to them or maybe in a Zoom, you're not going to be strangers even after a week, because that's a lot of hours to spend with someone. Yeah, and I used to work for a remote first company. So for me, I think it's less of a drastic change, because many startups, I used to work in the Bay Area, are kind of like this. A lot of my friends work at remote first companies. So a lot of this technology is really popular. Like Zoom is incredibly popular. I'm sure you guys know, and there's like a bunch of other ones out there, like High Five I know is one. Yeah.
Just to get some context, how big are your cohorts?
Ours is 22. I think the one above us is 28, 29, around there.
And do you guys have seniors ready? Like, do you talk regularly with them?
Yeah, we just had like family dinner with them over Zoom.
We have like a joint Slack channel. So the seniors and juniors in Slack together. One of my favorite channels that I have yet to post in, but I really like looking at, is called Lunch of the Day, where people like post the lunches they had that day. There's some really good looking ones, and then there's some really not good looking ones, to be honest. So there's still like lots of fun ways to interact in there. And like a couple clicks away, I think, is like the biggest point here, where like, for sure, the remote experience is not the same as in person. Like, it's not going to be for any role that is, not already a completely remote company, despite what's happening. But there's still lots of ways to interact, and still lots of ways to get together. There's like a Zoom meeting for every lunch and dinner if you want to join to eat with other people. But if you don't, that's also fine, just since you are with people actually a lot of the day. So sometimes people want to take a break or like don't want to like kind of talk the whole time for those. So totally, it is a different experience, but I think, both really good points about kind of, it's still a close-knit community. I think it is interesting to go that the cohorts that will start remotely versus having that 4 days like, we talked about, but still definitely lots of ways to interact. That's just from my perspective of looking at the channels.
I had a question about the technical interview, going into the technical interview. Like, my thought, if I get to that point, hopefully, how to prepare for that. I'm already like nervous thinking about it. I've done some of the things on CSX and attended some of the live, the Zoom meetings that they provide. I haven't done pair programming yet, but just kind of like your thoughts on that, because I'm super nervous about it.
I think, yeah, definitely one of the hardest parts of that isn't necessarily going to be the coding as much as it is the talking about coding for like an hour straight. What helped me the most personally was just get kind of practice, not just the programming, but also talking through the process. Like when you're doing those CSX exercises, if you have any left, while you're working on them, kind of just, and it's weird, but like on your own, just like talk through like you would in an interview, like, oh, okay, explain what you're doing. Pseudocoding is really helpful as well. And if you can, record yourself. And if you can, listen back to yourself, which I know is like the worst experience, listening to your own voice backwards. But that can be really helpful, hearing things that you might have missed while you're in the moment. Because like it's really, that's tough, being able to talk and think at the same time, without like getting stuck in yourself. But that was what really helped me, was recording myself, listening to myself, and then kind of critiquing yourself.
Yeah, and I would suggest pair programming if you could, because it is like my first time I didn't pass because honestly the pressure of someone just watching me code for an hour, like I wasn't comfortable with that, and I wasted a lot of time. Just like when I got stuck, I was more focused on the fact that someone was watching me code than I was like to actually think through the problem. I'm pretty sure Codesmith events are all remote, but I've gone to a few virtually and they end in pair programming. So I would say that's great for you to get used to like someone else watching you code. And also if the other person isn't quite as far as you are, it helps you like communicate a little bit better, because that's pretty important too.
There's actually a specific pair programming workshop this Thursday. So I think I can send you that. So that's just extra time. And there's a variety of different levels of people that join those. So we pair people up that have kind of the same experience level. So no need to be nervous for that, but I agree that pair programming is a great one. Other questions, either in the chat or out loud?
I might have missed it, but how does hiring day change since it's going to be remote now?
Yeah, so hiring day has actually been remote for the last couple of times. There's been phone screens. So we're continuing with the phone screen trend. I think that's a lot more typical for first round interviews versus kind of what we used to do. And so it's going to be the same in terms of structure. It'll just be phone interviews, but instead of being in the office taking those, you'll be home. So not too much change there. And if folks think of questions afterward, like I said, I will send out an email, so you're all welcome to ask me there, but want to give anyone a chance if you have, oh yep, awesome, go for it.
If you're not, like if you're looking at the online program, like you're not in LA or New York, so then like, the connection with companies that are not in LA and New York, like you mentioned Seattle, but Seattle would be even cool for me, like coming from Vancouver, because I am still a Yankee. So can someone speak to that? Like, like having a job that's not around LA or New York, like when you're doing the hiring and interviewing and stuff like that.
Yeah, so specifically, we don't do an interviewing day for our remote full-time and remote part-time programs. That isn't part of the hiring process, but we still do the other parts of the career services. So it's more just individualized depending on where you are looking to end up. Since a lot of our graduates from the LA and New York immersives don't stay in LA or New York either, we just kind of do more specific hiring practices in general. But if there's a very specific location that you're interested in, you'll work with our hiring support team on that location specifically. So we've had folks that have been really interested in Salt Lake City before. San Francisco is a huge one. We don't have a program there, but we have lots of grads there. And then actually randomly a lot more in North Carolina recently. So that's totally, it's a lot of the companies also that we are doing like that interviewing day for our on-site programs, those have other offices and other locations too. So it's not just specifically for LA and New York anyway. But a lot of the practices that we say in general are kind of the general practices. But then if there's specific, like I wouldn't say Seattle hiring practices is going to be super different than LA or SF or New York. But those company connections, we definitely have grads in Seattle. So we would connect you with those grads and those companies. And
then if you do a hiring day, like could someone like fly down to LA or like be a part of that, like even though they're online, or is it just kind of two separate like programs and two separate kind of like streams in terms of connecting with mentors and people?
Yeah, I'd say what we are doing for our remote programs is going to be a lot more connecting people that live in the same areas. What we did before, social distancing, was we encouraged people that are in those remote programs that are not in the same, or that are in the same location, to meet up. Actually, we organize meetups for them, but we aren't doing that currently. But that's going to be a lot of what it's going to be like going forward. And so we don't have that specific like interview day that's the same, but we'll just be connecting you to those grads remotely over email or Zoom links too. And then our hiring support team works just the same in terms of those locations. I think it's a little bit different for some of our international students that are looking at places that have a lot different hiring practices. I wouldn't say Canada necessarily, but we've had quite a few folks from Nigeria or Australia, the UK, and those are a little bit more different, and then we kind of advise on a more specific basis there.
I had a question related to like career and jobs too, placement. So do some of the students, like, do they, when they are looking to get hired, are they like, oh, I'll go anywhere that I can get hired, or like, I'd like to work in a startup, or like I saw someone is at Riot Games, or if they're like, oh, I want to work for gaming companies, like these are the ones I'm interested in. Like, is it more narrow? Like, do students tend to narrow, or is it broad?
I can do a little brief intro, and then Sherry and Vaughn, if you guys want to say what you're potentially interested in, I think that'd be cool. It really depends on the person. If you have a very specific interest, like for instance, gaming is like a very specific subset that actually works with a lot more different technology than we usually teach. But that's not to say we don't have grads that go into gaming, but then usually you'd try to cater your production project to set you up towards that. So you'd want to work with potentially other people that are interested in going into gaming, and maybe your production project's in something like Go versus JavaScript. If you know very specifically that's what you want. I would say most of our grads go into full stack catering on full stack front end focused roles, but that's not to say we have a lot of people that are interested in back end too. It is a full stack program, so it kind of prepares you for both. And then a lot of folks have kind of been, there's a lot of differing opinions, I think, on like how many roles are full stack these days, or kind of how it really depends on the company and like what overlap that has. But in terms of startups to bigger companies, I think it really just depends on the person and how specific they want to be. I think there's a big variety there. I don't know if Sheree or Vaughn, you guys want to talk about what you're interested or what you're hoping to do after Codesmith. Might not know yet, only week 4, but still.
Yeah, so I used to work in the startup space for about like 4 or 5 years. Like basically once I realized what a startup was, I decided I wanted to be in that space. And I think like the answer to your question is it really just depends, like the startup space is beautiful because it changes every day, so, and I know that the remote workspace is growing. I used to work at a remote first company. So we were about 50 or 60 people. We were a YC company, and over half of the company worked from home and lived all around the world. We had people in like Hong Kong and Japan. So I think if there is something you really want, you probably can find it, and then it's up to you on like how long you're willing to wait or work for it to get it. But generally, so I was in the travel space, and I think I'm probably going to enter back into something that's like a product I'd personally want to use, and go from there. I guess like if I really wanted it that bad, maybe I'd move there for it. If it was more of like a stepping stone for me to get where I want to be, maybe I wouldn't move there and I'd work there for a few years. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably a bad person to answer this question because I have no real idea of what I want to do when I get out here. Before I came in here, I was really trying to find work in like the medical field, medical devices. I probably won't be doing that with software engineering, but like for me, I have like ideas of like qualities in companies I'm looking for, not being evil being one of the top ones, but like the particulars, I'm not so sure about. Like coming into Codesmith, I didn't know too much about like the difference between back end or front end. Now I almost do, and I'm kind of leaning towards like front end because I really like that user experience. I like the way people like interface with technology. I think that's fun. So yeah, I don't think that answered your question at all, and I forget what I was talking about. But that's kind of where I'm at. 4 weeks in, we'll see. 6 weeks in later.
Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, everyone, say thanks to Sheree and Vaughn for me. Thank you guys so much for answering questions. I'm sure it's really good to get the student perspective and not my logistical perspective. But nice to meet everybody, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Monday. I will send an email out tomorrow probably, so you'll have my email, and feel free to follow up with other questions. I'll link a few things we talked about, like that pair programming workshop on Thursday, that blog post about from a CS degree to Codesmith. And then if there's anything else that you want me to link that I don't, just respond back and I can reply all again and back out. But thanks so much, guys, and have a good rest of your evening.